Hey there, fellow horse lovers. Welcome back to the Daily Ride podcast. I'm so excited for today's episode where I got to interview Tommy Gesell of Gazelle Equine. Tommy was a connection referred to me by my dear friend Alyssa, who grew up fox hunting, and Tommy is connected to her through the fox hunting community. Tommy has a wealth of knowledge training horses of all breeds and all backgrounds out of South Carolina, and he has his own training business called Gazelle Equine. Tommy is a wealth of knowledge with off-the-track thoroughbreds, and he can speak at length as to the mindsets, lessons, and outlooks that being a professional horse trainer has brought to him and his life personally, and can speak at length to a variety of experiences that I personally found fascinating. One of the gifts that horses have blessed Tommy with in his life is his love for embracing curiosity and developing an active, engaged mindset. And I think this can be easily applied to the rest of your life, and to not doubt yourself or your horse and know that you're capable of so much more. Your horse is capable of so much more. And it's just a matter of patience and being curious and flexible. I really appreciated talking to Tommy, and I hope that you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. As always, the Daily Ride podcast supports True Heart Healing. True Heart Healing is my nonprofit organization aimed to leverage the healing power of equine partnership and the joy of equine companionship to support and empower children with disabilities and/or life-altering illnesses, service members, veterans, and their families build stabilizing relationships, facilitate learning and personal growth, find hope, and discover purpose. If this is something that you would like to support, please head on over to www.the-daily-ride.com to check us out and make a donation. Trueheart and I greatly appreciate your support. I had so much fun talking to Tommy that I've decided to cut our interview into two parts. Today's episode is part 1 of 2. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tommy. It's great to have you on.
Glad to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey with horses? How did you get started, and what led you to where you are today with Gazelle Equine?
Well, it's been so long that it's kind of hard to remember. Though I was exposed to horses early in life, I'd never intended for it to be my career. Growing up, I just assumed that everyone had horses. We all rode. My parents, my siblings, my neighbors, we all rode. There's never one singular moment where I decided that this is what I wanted to be doing for the rest of my life. I just sort of woke up one day and I was doing it. And the next thing I knew, 30 years later had gone by and I was still doing it. Now, within that time frame, I've learned many things that led me to where I am now and the creation of Gazelle Equine. I'm not the same trainer that I was when I started. I would suck if 30 years had passed without evolution, right? In that time, I've kept things that serve the horses and myself well, and I've ditched things that I don't think that serve me and my horses in the better end. I've dumped training by a prescribed method, and I focus on what the horse actually needs.
As an individual?
Yes, ma'am. And I say this a lot. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. From bareback and saddle bronc riding to breaking babies to fox hunting and jumping, my entire career is a culmination of all these wonderful things you can do with horses.
It sounds wonderful. So that's a whole myriad of different disciplines. And with that, I would imagine there are skills that kind of translate across most of them. And just poking around your website, there were a couple of things that stuck out to me. One was that you bought the plane, not the pilot. So part of that is having to work with the rider and the human part of the equation too. But with that, you also emphasize the difference between being a horseman and being a horse trainer. So how would you personally define those two terms, and why is the distinction between them so important to you?
This was a kind of a difficult question to answer, but a horseman isn't necessarily focused on one specific way of a horse going, as opposed to a trainer of a certain discipline is to be focused on, one certain way that the horse is going to go. That's not to say that the trainer can't be a horseman, but there are often marked differences in the belief systems between the two. The horseman is often building a foundation for the direction for the horse, for his career, or the direction that the trainer intends him to go. And the trainer builds off of that foundation and refines to get the horse to the level of the intended discipline. And I don't mean that in any derogatory way at all. That's just me and kind of my way of thinking. And it's not necessarily, horseman versus trainer, that it's just there's a difference in between horseman versus trainer.
It sounds like you kind of need both. Like you need that solid foundation, holistic view of the horse. And then you also need a trainer to, like you said, refine and really polish and hone more specific skills in whatever discipline that horse is going in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you find yourself leaning more towards one mindset or the other?
Again, this is that is a difficult question to answer, but
Depends on the horse.
And I want to be clear and very careful here. I don't want there to be just like I said, one versus the other sort of situation. Horses need horsemen and they need trainers. And like I just said, there's a foundation building and there is specific training that's involved. That's not to say that they don't cross over either. So one benefits the other, and without one, you can't necessarily have the other, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So when you have a client approach you with their horse, I would imagine part of your job is not just training the horse and instilling those skills, but also developing both mindsets, both horseman and trainer, with the rider, with the client of yours, the human part of the client.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That can be difficult sometimes.
Really? Humans are hard to train? I've never heard of that. So with that and training yourself, being a human, who were some of your biggest influences in your own horsemanship journey and horse trainer journey? And what lessons really stick out to you throughout your own learning?
The horses themselves, I think, were the biggest influence. I mean, if you train one type of horse a whole life, you're going to train that horse forever. I mean, if I didn't, have to deal with the good, the bad, and the ugly, they're lessons I wouldn't have learned. And I know that kind of, I hope it makes sense in a way. I've never had a specific trainer say, take what I've taught you and become your own trainer. Every trainer, they say, this is the way it's done and this is the way you're going to do it. And I can't subscribe to that form of totality. I'm not a my way or the highway type of guy. I try to remain flexible when it comes to my horsemanship. So when it comes to the influences, I guess the biggest part of that is just the horses themselves, Morgan. Just the horses were probably the big influences. And if I was to say any names, I think I would feel bad that I would probably forget a lot of people that were an influence to me. And it's not specifically riding with them at a certain point, but people that I looked up to.
So what about the horses? I love that you mentioned that it really depends on the kind of horse that you're training, because each horse that we encounter has a different lesson for us on any given day. So are there horses that, looking back on your career, you're like, man, that horse really taught me a lot?
It's that there was a lot of horses in my past that I can say benefited me because they were just so bad and rotten.
Huh.
And at the same time, there was a lot of young horses that taught me a lot because they were just so natural in their ability and what they did. But personally, like I said, that I'll never truly own a horse. They're always for sale. There's a horse that I will never sell that will remain with us, until it's time for her to go, and that's Argo. And that's a thoroughbred mare off the track that is just absolutely. I think it's the first horse that I truly would never sell, and I'm fortunate to be able to semi-retire in a sense. And now she does belong to Amy, and I think Amy and her, it's neat to see the transition she's made from, coming off the track to everything she did for me in fox hunting and beyond into what I do in my jumping. And the fact that now that I'm able to hand her down to Amy is I think one of the most special things. And And it's really hard for me to look at horses that way, but every horse has taught me a lot. But
Mm.
Argo has kind of taught me to, God, this is really hard to say, is love a horse.
Gosh, I can only imagine. I am a total softie, and True will die with me. My own horse. There's no question. I would never be able to breed or train because I would never be able to say goodbye.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not allowed to go to the pound for the same reason.
yeah.
All the animals would come home and I would never be able to part with any of them. So I appreciate the kind of mentality that it requires to be able to do what you do. And like you said, have them for sale. What is it specifically about Argo? Was it that soul connection that we talk about with our heart horses, or was it something else? Another thing that I'm guessing is you talk about your versatility, and it sounds like she has a lot of that versatility that she brings to the table too.
She came at the exact time I needed her. That's a simple way of putting it, but little did I know she was going to do what she did for me. And it was at a time in the career that I had, not just, you know, in the working for the man I work for right now, but it was in my career of fox hunting, which is a whole nother story on that on but what she did for me in fox hunting as well, I'm not going to say she was a natural, she was easy to it, but she became the best fox hunter I had, or huntsman's horse that I had, and I had a few of them, but there was something just special about this horse, and I'm not sure exactly how to put it into words, but she made life easy for me at that time because I had so much going on. But also, she taught me so much when it came to jumping, and she was such a trainable horse. If I was to just leave it at that, she was so trainable, and that was and going from the English and fox hunting aspect to it to the Western side of it, to have a thoroughbred off the track, jumping a 4 foot triple bar to hacking out on in a bozo with her head down on the ground, and in a hand canner, is just, that was the her what she did for me as far as training was tremendous. And that's probably about the easiest way I can say it without going on and on about her. She's just a magnificent mare.
What an amazing lesson and role model to have too, to be that coachable and that trainable. I think all of us as humans, that's a skill that we ourselves can benefit from trying to cultivate in ourselves.
Yes, ma'am, exactly, yeah.
What are some skills about working with horses that have come naturally to you, and what are you currently working on developing?
It's Boy, you ask some really hard questions. And um uh
I'm currently working on my patience, if that helps. I'm a very soft person, so I feel like bonding with my horse and being sensitive to her comes naturally to me. But man, she knows how to push my buttons sometimes. So I'm working on patience right now.
well, and I will say that's one thing that horses have taught me is patience, and
Mm,
and not just patience, but open your mind. And there's a lot of answers that I could give to what I guess horses have taught me, what Argos taught me, and things like that. Not just an open mind, but an active mind. And when I say an active mind, is that you can't ever go on autopilot. You always need to be thinking when it comes to horses, not overthinking, but allowing your mind just to be flexible in the way you approach them, the way you ride them. And there's a constant evolution to what we're doing. And, I just want to be ready for that.
interesting. Can you give an example?
When I say there's like kind of this constant evolution to it, if we weren't evolved, the horse has evolved through time, just like human has, and if we don't evolve, with at or yeah, if we don't evolve, we get left behind, we go extinct. And so when it comes to the horses and the training, there's always been an evolution of training, and we have to evolve with that. There's things we can take from the past and build on. And it's not necessarily that we have to forget about the past and how we used to train horses, but it's evolving that certain method that we use to suit the evolution of the horse as well. And also suit the different breeds, the different types of horses that we're working with, or in my case, the different horses I'm working with, there's got to be an evolution to the training. And also to add with that, and this is a big part of it too, is evolving with the owners and the humans involved with the horses as well.
Mm.
And to me, sometimes it's like I say, I'd rather be working with horses anytime. They're easier to figure out sometimes. That's what I guess I could relate to. The evolution and what we're doing. And yeah, don't overthink. I go to bed at night thinking constantly about what I'm going to do the next day, or about what I'm going to do with this one certain horse, because I want to see improvement. But plus, that's all I think about.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the evolution and the dynamic skill set. Okay, you master one thing, there's one lesson, the horse approaches it another way, and then you're looking for the next thing. Like, how do we build upon that? Where are we at tomorrow when we finish? Where are we at the following day? What is their person doing now?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you adjust to that? Yeah, the people are the tricky part, aren't they?
They can be, but also at the same time, it is a delight to work with people as well, because there's a joy that comes along with them watching their horse progress and then being a part of that progression as well. I'm sure we're going to speak about that a little bit later, but yeah, when I talk about the people and the owners, it's like I'm going to say it's not in a derogatory way, but yes, humans are a lot more difficult to deal with than horses.
Yes. My trainer reminds me often, I probably could use the reminder more often than she gives me sometimes, but horses are very honest mirrors of ourselves, and that can be very humbling. But I would imagine it's kind of nice to be able to see the clients you work with, the human clients, develop themselves as a partnership with their horses and have that sense of confidence and self-accomplishment and personal development that you get to witness them building their own skills with their horse.
Yes.
That has to be rewarding.
Very, very, very rewarding too. And it's also, it's working out the problems that they might have with their, it could just be their horsemanship or just their confidence. Either way, there could be a problem that needs to be worked out. And that's just like working with a horse that a horse can't necessarily communicate to you through voice what's going on. And they're a lot harder well, for me, they're easier to read than humans. And I don't know why. I guess that just comes naturally to me. I don't know any other way to put it. It's just, it's easier for me to read a horse sometimes than it is most people.
Yeah. Less obfuscation.
Yes. And then that just goes to the fact that a horse can't help but be honest.
Yeah. You work with horses across all kinds of disciplines too. Can you share some of the disciplines that you've been involved in?
Wow, quite a few, and I'll say I don't do it for the money, but all joking aside, it's an advantage for me specifically because it satisfies my curious nature. I'm not comfortable with the constraints of being shoved into a box. I'm too interested and too inquisitive to drill on the same things over and over and over. It's good for my mental state, and I benefit, from it by getting an education across the board. I may not know the most about any one discipline, but I know enough about most of them to enjoy them. And if I can understand the basic premise of the discipline, then I can help prepare a horse for the life in that world. Again, I have to stress that I'm answering these questions from my own point of view. And that's something I'm very big on. This is all my point of view. This is the way I see it. And some people fare better by choosing a discipline and sticking to it. That's their preference. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if that's what they enjoy, who am I to say that they're wrong? I can only speak to the benefit it offers me. Of course, if you're new and returning to riding, I would suggest trying a little bit of everything to see what you might like. As far as horses concerned, I can't say this enough. I think a horse needs to be physically and mentally flexible, because you never know where that horse will end up. And they can start in one career and then jump into another career, and they need to be prepared for that. And its owners, they may have thought that their horse would be a cross-country speed demon, but the horse ends up being happier in the hunter ring. Flexibility is the gift that can benefit the horse for its lifetime. It's why all the horses that come through here get familiar with having a polo mallet or a rope swung off of them. They might not be polo ponies or roping horses in the future, but it exposes them to the movements, the noises. It's so much better in my mind to expose them to an array of activities than drill them on any one thing. It keeps us both from getting bored. I get bored really easy. But, the horse in question may not be headed to a career in jumping, but with me, they will learn that they can jump. They will see a polo mallet, they will see a cow or something like one.
Right.
That's just the way I look at it. And so the benefits of knowing a little bit about all the disciplines, to me, benefits me better than knowing everything about one discipline.
Right. And what a service you can do to the horses you work with, because like you said, a lot of horses, we expect them to be able to career change multiple times in their life. I mean, look at Argo, like you shared. She's spent her first part of her career on the track, and now look at everything else that she's been able to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you find that horses that also have a sense of curiosity enjoy the versatile exposure that you give them? Do you encounter horses that are not curious and seem to really not enjoy it?
Well, yes and no, I guess on that is I do find horses that there's certain things that they are curious about, and then there's things that you wouldn't think that they would spook at, but they are terrified of. And but it's one of those things. Again, you're dealing with the mind. And so they can't speak verbally or express their feelings. Like, I think a big thing, we people like to humanize horses a lot, but then when we look at them as an animal aspect, is their mind thinks a certain way, and we're never going to know exactly how that mind works. And so there is certain things that I think horses prefer doing over other activities or jobs. As you're not going to take a thoroughbred out and start knocking cattle off of them, and you're not going to take a
draft horse.
Yeah, you're
not. Polo.
You're not going to take a gaited horse to the track and win the stakes and things like that. And even though they might like to run, they might not be suited for it. But
right.
there is a it's to break it down. There's things that some horses like and dislike, and it's just basically it's because they have their own personalities, just like humans.
Yeah. I'm hearing a lot of consideration that you have for your horses that you work with, in addition to what they're athletically predisposed to. It sounds like this well-rounded approach, in addition to benefiting and preparing them for career changes and, having a solid lifelong foundation. Sounds like it also is a good mental health benefit for the horse.
It's just like me. It's keeping my mind engaged is what keeps me from getting bored and what keeps me evolving in this industry. And I think with horses, it's the same way, is keeping their mind engaged. It's teaching them, think through it. And I'm going to say that sometimes a horse is not very smart, either because they're doing what we ask of them or they're not doing what we ask of them. We think they're dumb either way. But, challenging a horse sometimes is good for their sensibility, their mental state, just like it is ours. And so I'd like to present a challenge to a horse. And I never doubt that a horse is not going to do what I ask of them. I never doubt them. And I think that's just one of the biggest benefits I think anybody can offer to a horse that they either have in training or that they own, is never doubt them. Don't. Just don't.
Yeah, they'll get it somehow eventually.
But
the try might look different than you were expecting.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that mindset. That's also very positive and uplifting, and I'm sure the horse can feel that energy and intention coming towards them. No one likes to feel doubted or underestimated.
Absolutely.
How do you approach training horses for all these disciplines? Do you find that there are common fundamentals across all of them, or are there things that just never apply to different disciplines?
Well, first of all, it's basics that are required across all disciplines, I believe. Let me sit on your back, go forward, go right, go left, back up. all of those movements. There isn't a discipline that does not require direction and cooperation. So I don't change that report card for any horse that I take in on training. Can the horse be led? Can the horse accept the bit? Can the horse truly go forward? I'm not talking just about moving forward, but truly go forward. Are they stuck anywhere? That's all very basic and a foundational requirements. Now, if I'm made aware that an owner wants the horse to go in a certain direction after their time with me, I may decide to ride them in the bit that the owner plans on riding them in, or make refinements to the basics. Oftentimes, once I think the horse is ready, I will have the owner bring out their tack they intend to use on the horse. It's helpful for me because I get to see where the rider is and how they will be communicating with the horse. And it's helpful for the horse because once they go home, introduction to whatever equipment is being used won't be a surprise. I will say one training modality that doesn't really cross over in training is racehorses. And the time that I was exposed to racehorse training, the focus wasn't on making a versatile horse or planning for a career after racing. They're like Ricky Bobby. They just want to go fast. And they have a limited amount of time to get these horses to where they want them to be. So the focus is generally run, just run. And they run off the forehand and haven't spent much time being collected or anything like that. Now, that being said, there are many racehorse owners and trainers that prepare their horses for life after the track. My horse Argo is a good example. I mean, she's a great example. Her original owner made sure that she had something to do other than race when she wasn't at the track. She was hacked out. She learned how to have a good time off, and away from work. That way she didn't think rider equals go fast. I feel it benefited her greatly. And,
Yeah.
and like a man in Aiken that gave me a great opportunity, Marshall Lamb told me, the reason I'm having you break these 9 horses here is that one of them might make it to the track. And the other 8, I'm going to need to sell, and they didn't know how to stop. And that's something I've never forgot, Morgan. That just sticks in my brain when it comes to that was just a huge influence in the way I thought about racehorses and when it came to training. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of crossover I find in training racehorses until they are done off the track. It's almost as if you've got to start over, not necessarily in their foundation, but just in the way that they're going to start to carry themselves and learn how to carry themselves and go correctly.
Yeah, and carry themselves and balance and take direction from a rider that isn't just zoom.
Yes, ma'am. And balance is a big deal too.
Yeah.
And so and a lot of work goes into taking a horse off the track and giving them a new career and being successful at it.
So this is something I don't personally know a whole lot about. I'd like to ask a little bit more about that. I wonder if some of my listeners don't know a whole lot about off the track thoroughbreds either. How many years does it take to really, I guess, deprogram an ex-racehorse? Some of these horses, I mean, I know that there's a movement within the racing community to have things be a little bit more ethical and humane, but some off the track thoroughbreds that I've personally run into seem to have a lot of mental trauma in addition to the physical beating that career can present them with.
Well, there is a lot of that, and it also I think when you're taking a horse off the track and you're finding a new career for them and you want to get them out of that that mental thought of human equals fast, human equals go, is take for instance, there's a horse I had named Mr. Brown, and he was off the track, didn't run very fast. He was just kind of a big old chunky thing. I mean, one of the most gentle horses I've ever had, and just took to fox hunting like he could have cared less. Just easy going as could be. And then, there was a thoroughbred I had, Hoy. He was off the track. Neat little horse. He was pretty high strung. But what I did with him is let him use that energy. And so once I was able to get him kind of starting get him balanced and get him collected, and started presenting him to fences, I found that giving him a job really helped his mental state. And he wasn't made to basically be like Mr. Brown, chill, easy, relax. This horse wanted to go. He wanted to work. And so it was understanding the difference, in those two horses off the track. And then and also understanding that they came from a race barn. So a lot of horses, running, a lot of horses being trained for the track and not necessarily being, broke, for instance, as opposed to like Argo had, she didn't live at the track. She would be carried to the track. They would, either race trainer, breezer, and then she would go home. And then, like I said, she'd be hacked out by the owner, and the owner did a fantastic job treating her as a horse, not a racehorse, a horse. And to me, is what that extended this mare's life. Coming to me, it made it easier for me to find her and, not find a career for this horse, but make sure she was going to do what I needed her to do, because she had such a cooperative demeanor about her. And so thoroughbreds off the track, they can sometimes just be quiet as a mouse and go right to a new career, or it's going to take you 1, 2, 3 years to get them ready, let's say 3-day event horse. You're not going to take a horse off the track and put them right into dressage, because they're on their forehand. And you've got to teach these horses to rate, to carry themselves to the fences. And so if you're running cross country, these horses have to learn to jump at speed. And then when you take them into the show ring, these horses have to learn to jump at not speed and have more finesse over the fences, because rails fall down, and that's penalties. And so there's a lot of work that goes into a thoroughbred off the track, depending on the career, the brain, just the horse itself.
And I'd imagine there's also a lot of conditioning that comes with that too. Like you said, they're on the forehand, they're just supposed to go fast, and they might be in great, cardio shape from all the running, but do they have muscle development in their hind end?
Yeah, let's say that their front end is developed more, than their hind end, of course, but they still do have a top line to them. There still is strength in the way they do, let's say, carry themselves in a sense. Now, I'm saying this just through experience, and I know a lot of, probably every racehorse trainer is going to disagree with me on this, on my opinion of how they train, because like I said, there are a lot of good racehorse trainers out there that understand that these horses are probably going to go on to a new career, so why not give them that foundation? And that foundation that is not necessarily going to take away from their running.
If anything, it might complement.
Well, and there are people that think that, racehorse trainers that think that complements it, and then there are racehorse trainer that says we got 40 horses in the barn, we need to get through them and pick out the best ones. We don't have time to look beyond them running on the track. Leave that up to the owner, or we'll worry about that when they quit running. And sometimes it's not a mental thing, but sometimes it's a physical thing. The horse has got a great brain, but he's underdeveloped for running on the track. Now, that's not to say it's bad conformation and he just doesn't run fast, just like humans as well. And sometimes a horse that just doesn't run fast they're almost dispensable, not disposable. They're just dispensable. They don't need them anymore. So horses off the track, great resource. Resource.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing some of that. I personally have not really been exposed to that world, so I'm always really curious.
Yes. Yep.
And I think there's a stereotype that off the track thoroughbreds tend to be fire breathing dragons. And I appreciate you sharing the one horse that you had experience with that was not the case.
Yeah.
You mentioned the last time we spoke about the importance of having a versatile seat. Why is that so important for riders to develop, and how do you teach riders to develop one?
Wow. That's a phrase I use often to, cover a lot of territory.
Yeah. Well, first, what's a seat?
Well,
maybe start there.
Yeah, it's when I say a versatile seat, I mean someone who can, once the foundation is laid on a horse, they can begin to ride that horse in the direction of its proposed career. For example, once I have a horse comfortable in their foundation, and I know from the owner, like I said before, the horse will move on to pleasure, cross country, a certain discipline, I need to be able to ride them in the manner in which they will be ridden when they go home. It's not, it's not for everybody, but it's how I like to ride the horses in my care these days, in my training. And another advantage to the versatility is that when riding a young horse and trying to get them correct in the way they carry themselves, is that a good solid seat will always be prepared to ride that horse correctly in the brief moment, just a brief moment that they do ride correctly. And you have to be there to support them. So that's the importance of having the versatility, a versatile seat. And then the begun, if you're able to support that horse through that brief moment of correctness, then they start to understand and build to self carriage and balance. And balance is to me number one when it comes to training horses. And I'm not talking about getting them broke, but just when it comes to training. And so then they learn the questions to the answers you're asking of them through that correct seat. And it's a very difficult question to answer, but that's probably about the most educated way I could probably answer that question, is why it is important to have a versatile seat.
Mm. So you can support the horse when
Yes,
they're trying different things that answer your questions, and then when they get the correct answer, then it feels good for them too. Like, oh, that's okay. We're in sync now. I'm
yes,
carrying
ma'am.
myself correctly.
Yes, and you've got to be there at that split second to be, and like I said, be there to support them through that. Key, be you've got to be, when a horse is correct, you've got to be 10 times more correct than them in order to start to advance the way they carry themselves and advance their correctness.
Yeah. Highlight that right answer for them. Like, yes, more of
Yes,
that.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Wow. So, and you develop that by writing in the way that you anticipate they'll go home, or
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
It's, after a certain period, like I said, once they're comfortable in their foundation and in the way that they're going, and if I've got an owner that says, this horse is going to be, headed for the hunter ring, then I'll start to change my seat and change a little bit of the way I ride them, from the seat to the bridle, from my lower leg, and how much energy and impulsion I'm asking of these horses and things like that. Like, and if there's a horse that's going to come to me that's going to be, let's just say, a 3-day event horse, then I'm going to ride them more up, more forward, a different head carriage as opposed to a hunter. Or if I'm going to have a rope horse, they're going to work completely different than any of what I'll call, let's just say, the English type. Not to separate them necessarily, but let's just make it easy to understand. Is I will ride my English horses differently in their disciplines, as also in the Western disciplines. I'll ride different from English, but also within the Western disciplines, they'll be ridden differently as well. I know that's maybe a little bit difficult to understand, but the easiest way to for me to describe that.
Yeah. Each English and Western world, there's like dressage, jumping, fox hunting, equitation, versus the Western world, barrel racing, roping, cutting. Like you said, you're expecting different head carriages. You're asking for different postures and skills.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In the way they the lateral movements that say cutting horses, they're going to be making major lateral movements as opposed to the Grand Prix jumper is going to be very forward, very up in the way they carry themselves, and really, really on their hind end, and so that's where your training really splits off. And having that an adjustable seat and a versatile seat to either one of those disciplines is very, very valuable, because again, you're going from, and I will say that a saddle is just a saddle no matter what it is, but yes, there will be a time that there is a Western saddle involved and an English saddle involved, and having a versatile seat in either one of those saddles is just so important when it comes to training these young horses. And if that's what you're training, then yes, I think it's so important to have that versatile seat. And like I say, you'll see me in an English saddle with a Western bridle, and it doesn't make it, it's just training. That's all it is. And I like to say that the English saddle helps me refine what I'm teaching a horse in my Western saddle.
Mm.
It helps me get to a seamless movement. When I'm asking a horse to do something, I want that movement to be seamless. And I think that the English saddle and even the dressage saddle helps me refine those movements to be more seamless, more correct. And just, when you watch a horse go, they just go.
Do you feel like it's easier in the English saddle because it's more close contact? It's easier to feel each other?
I believe so. Yes, I do. An English saddle, of course, you can't ride like a Western saddle. I mean, if you did, it would be probably uncomfortable and it'd look really kind of ugly.
Silly.
Yeah, silly. But yes, an English saddle is going to put your leg on a horse. It is going to put your rear end in the seat and pay attention to what you're feeling on their back. You've got to ride an English saddle balanced. And a balanced horse is a secure horse, is a happy horse, is a confident horse. And in a Western saddle, you've got a little more room to let's say relax, take the leg off.
Well, I mean, there's more between you. And in a Western saddle, I always feel like I'm forced to sit a certain way versus where in an English saddle, I have to carry myself because there's less holding me.
Yes,
Like I have to hold myself.
yes, ma'am. You've got to be. In my opinion, you've got to be a strong rider. And when I say strong rider to ride an English saddle, I don't mean like you've got to be this advanced level rider of a certain level. It's just that a weak leg is not going to ride an English saddle very long because you're going to get tired. And also, a strong leg doesn't necessarily mean an effective leg in an English saddle. It means that you can just sit in an English saddle and try to ride a Western saddle like an English saddle and vice versa. It just doesn't work. And each saddle does serve their purpose, because I don't know if you've ever tried, but jumping a 3-foot fence in a Western saddle is not that comfortable.
Yeah, I was going to say, ouch.
Yeah. And also, trying to, let's say, cut cattle on an English saddle is a little more difficult because there's not a whole lot to hold on to.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing to
Um,
dally to either.
and it's fun to try, but
Yeah.
there's its disadvantages to each, but there's a huge advantage to each of them when used and ridden correctly.
Yeah. So do you start horses in a Western and then move them to the English?
I do. I do it, just also for the reason that that I can hold on to the
Yeah, you got
Western
more to grab.
saddle. If I get one that's of course going to hump up or get snorty with me, I've got a little more to hold on to. But that's not to say that I haven't started a colt in an English saddle and had to deal with the same thing, just not as bad. But doing an English saddle will make you a better rider. But yeah, I start all my babies in a Western saddle with a rear cinch, and because why not? And that's just part of my program. And then if that horse is intended to be ridden, in an English saddle, then I will start riding them in English saddle as soon as I can. And that's not to say that that's all they'll be ridden. I'll put them back in a Western saddle just because if there's some things I need to work on that I'm not able to say, let's get done in an English saddle, that's maybe to say that I really need to get after one, I'm gonna put him back in a Western saddle. But also too, if the horse isn't going to have a career, let's say in the English world, I'm still going to ride him in an English saddle, because why not? Because if they are headed towards, let's say, a Western discipline, and then at the end of their career, they might go to somebody that likes to ride English. And so the owner of that horse, when the prospective buyer says, can that horse go English? The owner can say confidently, yes, they can. Because to me, that's all my horses. It's not just about swinging the polo mallet and swinging the rope off of them, but it's riding them in both English and Western saddles as well, confidently.
Yeah, that exposure.
And correctly, of course,
yes. Yes. So, okay, you've worked with a bunch of different saddles and different tack. You've worked with a lot of different breeds of horses too. Can you share some of the breeds that you've had experience with?
Wow. It might be easier to
Which ones you haven't?
yeah, exactly. Mention the ones that I haven't worked with. Let's just say gaited horses, Icelandic ponies. Yeah, I haven't worked with any of them that I know of. Otherwise, it's pretty much all there, from ponies to honies to geldings, mares, stallions, most
Ponies?
breeds. Yeah, basically small horse. Not quite a pony, not quite a horse. So we'll call them honies. And so yeah, it's from the Andalusians to the Frisians. I've ridden them all. I've broke them all, and
What about a Hancock?
yes, actually I own
Wonderful.
one.
Oh,
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah, I've got one.
Mustangs.
God, I could. That's a whole nother podcast here on the
Uh,
Mustangs. But yeah, no, my first fox hunt was on a Mustang.
Very cool.
Yeah, that was. I thought I was going out for a ride on this man's property when like I said, we pulled up and it's a fox hunt. We had two Mustangs in the trailer and they had probably 45 days worth of rides on them.
Wow.
And so their first outing when they get to South Carolina is fox hunt.
I was gonna say 45 days is not much.
But when it comes down to like what's my favorite breed to work with, it's I don't have one. If it has four legs and whinnies, we're off to a good start. I mean, I love different things about different horses. I like the speed and elegance of a thoroughbred. I like the beauty and talent, the elegant movement of the warm bloods once they've matured, of course, because it does take a while for them to mature. And then I appreciate that kind of four-wheel drive aspect of just a short little chunky quarter horse. And most breeds have certain values that aren't hard to appreciate. Maybe I'm not a fan of Arabians, but that's only because I haven't met one that I liked, and I haven't met that many.
Yeah.
I don't mean to offend Arabian lovers. I'm just half kidding when I say that.
Well, it's just like people. Not everyone is gonna like you,
Yes, and absolutely.
and you're not
Yep.
gonna like everyone. Doesn't mean that they're bad.
Yeah.
Cool. So it sounds like you've got a pretty good understanding of how breed influences athletic ability and mental predisposition. So I'd imagine it also influences your training approach pretty significantly. Do you find that you adopt your approach in big ways to a horse's breed or personality? Or again, is it just kind of across the board fundamentals?
It's at first I was kind of say it doesn't matter, but after giving it some thought, I'll say that in a sense that uh, something as simple as parentage can influence what I'm going to do with a horse. It doesn't even have to be a breed specific. Say I have two quarter horses. One is cutting bred, like hyper cutting bred, like super intense, and the other is show bred in the vein of the peanut pushing type, head down to the ground. And I know that each horse, despite both being quarter horses, are going to possess attributes that are vastly different. That it would seem there are different breeds when they aren't. Same breed, different disposition. The cutting horse might be speedy on lateral movements and their building is compact. Whereas like the peanut pusher is going to be a slower, maybe a little bit longer in the back. So their ideas or prejudices or what, they might give me some pretense about the horse, but generally, the horse is what it is, and how I train it is a direct result of its responses to me during our time together. And well, the
Yeah.
people or owners can sometimes influence things as well. Although I wish that weren't so. My best clients are the ones who give me their trust and don't try to co-train horses with me. And I will say that I have some great clients. You just hand them over and they just say, do what you do. And that's what I do. There are other rare individuals that ask me not to do something, like hobble their horse, for instance. When I explain the method and reasoning behind why that's part of my program and they still resist, all I can do is accept their wishes. I'm not going to do anything to a horse that its owner has explicitly asked me not to do. It's just something we have to work around. I have to find another way, and that's part of being a better horseman and the horseman I am.
It's part of evolving, if you
It
will.
is. Yep.
Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of the Daily Ride podcast. I am feeling inspired and empowered to go work with my horse, and I hope you are too. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, enjoy the ride.